Good morning. My name is Kara Cleveland, and I'm the supervisor of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, using iga.in.gov, presented by Kim Mattioli, Student Services Librarian for the Jerome Hall Law Library at Indiana University Bloomington. A few housekeeping items before we start. If you are having sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in that chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issue you are experiencing, we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after it has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in that chat box on the left. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and will get your question to Kim as soon as there's a good opportunity. There will also be time near the end for questions. The session today is worth 1 TLEU, and your certificate will be available for download at the end of the webinar. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and archived. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's Archived Webinars page. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. All right, now I am happy to turn this over to Andrea Morrison, and she is going to talk about the group Indigo before Kim begins her presentation. All right, Andrea?
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Morrison. I am a current officer of Indigo, Indiana Networking for Documents and Information of Government Organizations, serving as Education Committee Chair. Indigo is co-sponsoring our first webinar with the Indiana State Library and hope to have many more. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's webinar on the Indiana General Assembly, Kim Mattioli. Kimberly Mattioli is a Student Services Librarian at the Indiana University Maurer School of Law, Jerome Hall Law Library. She has her JD from the University of Michigan Law School, her MLS from Indiana University School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering, and her bachelor's from Michigan State University. She teaches advanced legal research at the law school, and her recent research explores how the digitization of legal materials impacts self-represented litigants. The purpose of our group, Indiana Networking for Documents and Information of Government Organizations, or INDIGO, is to provide a forum for discussion of problems and concerns and for the exchange of ideas by librarians working with government information. We also support programs on government information for librarians and the public. We have 2 in-person meetings with programs each year, and we encourage those interested to join us. You can see our Google Sites IN.gov docs on the screen. Please look at our site, and if you have a specific request for a future continuing education webinar on government information or a program idea, please let us know. At the end of the webinar, Kim will put my email, amorriso@indiana.edu, in the chat box so you can contact me directly. And with no more ado, I'm going to turn this webinar to our presenter, Kim Mattioli. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, hello everyone. I really want to thank Andrea Morrison, Indigo, and the Indiana State Library for putting this webinar together. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have a bit of a cold and there's a chance that I'm going to be coughing my way through this webinar. I tried to use our webcam microphone so that I wasn't coughing like directly into a microphone and into all of your ears, but nobody could hear me. So I guess we're just going to have to push forward the best that we can. And again, I apologize in advance for the many pauses that I'm going to have to take so that I can cough. So let me start just by giving you a little bit of background on myself and on why I think webinars like this one are important. So one of my main research interests has been on the digitization of legal materials and how that digitization impacts both self-represented litigants and also the general researcher who are used to relying on print legal sources. So more and more law libraries, especially public law libraries, are getting rid of their print materials, and that includes primary sources like statutes and regulations. So this is due to the fact, for one, that everyone is losing their budget, and two, due to the fact that information is freely available online, and law students and lawyers don't necessarily want to look at things in print. So government websites do make legal information freely available online. It's also available online from other sources. And it's obviously a very good thing to have that government information available to more people through the internet. However, in order to make use of this information, you have to know that it's there. And you have to understand the terminology and you have to know how to find it. And so this is kind of where my research interests arose, was thinking about self-represented litigants who may not really be very knowledgeable about the computer or how to use the internet. So that's how my interest started. But even aside from self-represented litigants, if you're not overly familiar with the law, it can be hard to know the different terminology and to know the difference between something like a statute and a regulation. So I think that a webinar like this is very important so that people can know what they have access to and actually make use of it, rather than just, having access to it online is one thing, but knowing how to make use of it is the more important thing. So today I'll go over the type of information that's available on the Indiana General Assembly's website, iga.in.gov, and I'll walk you through how to find those things. And I'll also leave time at the end for questions. And I couldn't hear Kara's introduction because I didn't have the headset on at that time. But if you have questions throughout, I will not be able to see the chat because I'm going to be sharing my screen. So if you have a question, type it in and Kara can jump in and stop me, and I will answer the questions as best I can. Okay, so I want to begin just by going over some general information about the Indiana General Assembly and then some legal terminology so that we're all starting on the same page here. The Indiana General Assembly is made up of the Indiana House of Representatives and the Indiana Senate. Representatives serve for 2 years and senators serve for 4. Both houses create bills, and then a bill must be passed by both houses before being sent to the governor to be signed, and that's how it becomes a law. So the General Assembly in Indiana meets part-time. During odd-numbered years, they meet for 61 days, and during even-numbered years, they meet for 30 days. Both the House and the Senate have several different committees, and that's often where a bill is formed and then sent to the full House or the full Senate. So that brings me to the terminology list here. So I've talked a lot about bills, and what a bill is just proposed legislation that's under consideration by a legislature. So a statute, on the other hand, is a law that has been enacted by a legislative body. So bills become laws, just like everyone learned from Schoolhouse Rock. It happens the same in Indiana as it does on the federal level. So you can find statutes in a couple of different forms depending on where they are in the publication process. So under statutes there, I put both the Indiana Acts and the Indiana Code. The Indiana Acts are the laws that were passed in a particular legislative session. And then after that, they move on to be codified in the Indiana Code. So generally speaking, if you have a research need, you'll be using the Indiana Code maybe more often to research than you would the Indiana Acts. And this is because the Indiana Code has gone through the process of codification, meaning that the statutes are organized by topic. You can use finding aids like an index to look for them. laws that are no longer good, laws that have been repealed, are taken out of the Indiana Code, and everything is more up to date, as opposed to the Indiana Acts that are a chronological listing of laws. There are times when you would want to use the Indiana Acts, but generally speaking, the Indiana Code is what you'll use for research. Most of what I'm going to talk about today will be legislative, but I also did want to here just define what a regulation is, because you'll hear people talk about laws and regs, and there's a big difference, so I want to make sure that everyone's clear on that. So a regulation is it's a really detailed rule that's passed by an executive agency. It is done under statutory authority. Statutes allow agencies to promulgate rules. And I wanted to bring it up because statutes and regulations are sometimes confused, as they can look very similar to each other, and sometimes they're even on the same topics. So while they're similar, it's important to remember that they are promulgated differently. Regulations are by agencies and statutes are by legislatures. So the Indiana Register is one place where you can find Indiana regulations. So the Indiana Register is kind of similar to the Indiana Acts in that it publishes the regulations that are passed in a particular year, and then a lot of other stuff that we'll talk about a little later, but that's kind of generally the idea. And then the Indiana Administrative Code is similar to the Indiana Code. So it's organized by subject, and it only has the current regulations that are in effect, and is a bit easier to research than something like the Indiana Register. So I'm going to move away from my PowerPoint here. There is more of a PowerPoint that will be made available to you, but I'm going to go over and share my screen, and it's a little bit difficult to flip back and forth. So just know that the PowerPoint is there and it will be made available to you, but I'm now just going to go over and share my desktop so that you can see some live web demos here. So before I get started too much, I did want to show you this document here, and you can find this just by Googling how a bill becomes a law, Indiana. And also, I think I have linked it in the PowerPoint. If not, I'll make the link available to you. But this just goes into a lot of different details about the Indiana General Assembly. And if you scroll down to, so up here, it'll tell you how bills are passed through the legislature. And then if you scroll down to page 6, it gives you a nice glossary of different legislative terms and phrases, because there's a lot and it can be a bit confusing, even for someone who, has been to law school. So this is a good place to check as just a general reference if you need a little bit of background reading. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm just going to minimize this here. Okay. So now that we know some of the terminology, let's move on and start talking about how to find legislative materials on iga.in.gov, which is the official website for the Indiana General Assembly. So the first thing I want to point out is that there is a search function over here on the upper right. So you can just go here and do kind of a basic search, or you can click on advanced search, which I'm going to do right now, and that's going to give you a lot of different options for searching the IGA website. So automatically it's going to have your search be a keyword search, but there are lots of other ways that you can search. So you see this says IC title, article, and chapter. That is the Indiana code. So you can search by, if you know that you're looking for a code section, you can search there. If you know you're searching, if you have a bill number in mind, you can do that, if particular legislator. So I'm just going to leave it on keyword for the moment, though. You also can have it contain a keyword or exclude a keyword if you can think of a reason why you would need to do that. You can also filter by year or session. So you can go back to 2009 and search for bills or laws from a particular session. I'm going to leave it on the current. And then you can filter by chamber. So it automatically does automatically does both, but you could choose House or Senate. So I'm going to leave everything as it is and do a search in quotations for charter schools. And using the quotations just makes the search a bit more precise, and we'll search charter schools as a phrase rather than as two separate words. So I'm just going to click search. And a search like this brings back a lot of different results. So On the left, you can narrow and filter, so you can just look at bills that involve charter schools, House or Senate journals, laws, and then this will take you to the parts of the Indiana Code that talk about charter schools. You can also search by year, so in this case, I just left it at 2018. So this was like a pretty simple example, but it is what you would do if you if you're looking, if you were looking, or if you have a patron looking for Indiana government information on a particular topic, and they don't know like what citation it is in the code or something like that. So that's a good way that you can search by topic and then go down here and filter toward what you need. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the main page here. Aside from doing an advanced search, you can also do a citation search. So this is a search of the Indiana code. And if you have a code citation, you can type it in here and it will take you right to the citation. So the Indiana code has a 4-part citation, and you can remember it by the acronym TAX, title, article, chapter, and section. You can also search for bills if you have a particular bill that you're looking for. And you can browse by legislator up here too, which is kind of a helpful feature. So just as an example, I'm just going to pick someone randomly here. And it will take a minute to load here, and then it will bring me to a page about this particular legislator. So you have just some information up at the top. And then you also have a description or a list of all of the different bills that this particular legislator has been a part of in the past year. So she's authored several bills. It will go down to where she co-authored bills, and then it'll also talk about resolutions that she's either authored or co-authored. It will also give you a list of all of the different committees that she's on. So you can see she's the chair of the ethics committee, for example. So this is helpful if you have a patron who just wants to know what their legislator has been up to, or if they want to know whether they want to vote for someone again for an incumbent if there's an election coming up or something like that. And I feel like I just saw that there was a question here.
Yes.
Did I? Okay.
Yes. By
What was the question?
By doing a search for a legislator, can you find how they voted on different items?
So yes, and we will get into that in just a minute. So let's go back. So I don't know if you can do it from this page, but yes, you can look up a bill and see how a particular legislator voted. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Okay. So now that we've talked about the different ways to search, sorry. Now that we've talked about searching, let's go back to the main page here and look at where there are all these different tabs. So I'm going to actually talk briefly about all of them at some point, but I wanted to start with the legislation tab. So if you click on the legislation tab, you're going to see 4 different options. You'll have bills, resolutions, by legislator, and by subject. So I'm going to click on the bills one here. And this is going to bring up a list of all of the bills that were introduced for the 2018 session. And I wanted to just talk for a minute about how this website looks because it's a little confusing. So if you just look at this page, you can see that it has different colors, and I feel like most people would automatically assume that this means that I've clicked on a lot of these, and that once you click on it, the color changes, because that's what I thought when I first looked at it, and I was confused. But actually what it means is the links that are in blue actually went on to become laws. They became public laws, while the gray links, those all died at some point during the legislative session. So just try to keep that in mind, that it is not actually that I have clicked on all of these or that you have accidentally clicked on them or something. So let's just look at an example of a bill that did not become a law. So I'm going to click on Senate Bill 7, school calendar. So the first thing that pops up is a digest, and it will give you some helpful information. It'll tell you who authored the bill, who co-authored the bill, and then just a quick explanation of what the bill is. So this one would have required public schools and also private schools to not start school before the last Monday in August. So you can look at the bill itself by clicking on latest version, and it will tell you which citations it would have affected, give you a synopsis, when it would have become effective, things like that. Um, Clicking on bill actions will give you a like a reverse chronological list of all of the things that have happened to that particular bill in that session. So it gives you a timeline starting at the bottom with the first action. So you can see that the last thing to happen was that this bill was referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Procedure, where then nothing ever happened. So it was introduced, authored, and everything on the same day, and then it never went any further. So now let's go back and look at a bill that actually went somewhere so that you can see the difference. So let's click on SB1, Senate Bill 1, Sunday carryout sales, which I'm sure most people probably recall was a fairly big deal back in the winter, where you can now buy alcohol on Sundays. So again, it gives you this digest, tells you who authored the bill, who sponsored it, and who co-authored it. You can click on the latest version to see what the bill looks like now. And then if you click on bill actions, then you can see that there's a lot more that happened here. So you'll see that it was referred to committees, voted on in the Senate, referred to the House, where it was referred to another committee. It was amended and sent back to the Senate, then voted on in both again, and then finally signed by the governor up here at the top. And then it became Public Law 1 for the 2018 session. So to answer the question that we had a few minutes ago about how you can see who voted for what, there are a couple of different ways. So I'm going to click on Senate roll calls, and then you can click on roll call and see who voted which way on the amendments, and then also on the bill itself. So you can see all the yays here, all the nays, and there was nobody who didn't vote. This, I believe, it'll tell you like it gives you the vote sheet of who voted from the committee. So this is from the Committee on Public Policy. You can see that it was a unanimous decision on the committee level. And then you can do the same thing from the House. So we have all the yays, all the nays, and some people not voting. So you can also look at the different versions of the bill here, if that's something that's of interest to you, like how it changed as it moved through, and all the different amendments that were tried to, that they tried to put in. And you can also look at the committee reports if there are any interesting ones about this particular bill. In this case, the committee reports don't really say a whole lot, but apparently they never say much, but you can look at the committee reports there if you need to have some sort of legislative history that it's not something that you would tend to use very often, but it is there if you want to have just, a citation or something like that. It just tells you how the committee voted, basically. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the main bills page here. So if you look over in the upper right, you can see that this says current 2018 session. So if you want to see previous sessions, you can click here. So if you're looking from 2014 to present, then it's going to be in basically the same format that I've just showed you. If you want to look at anything before that, you can click here where it says previous session archives. So this brings you to all of the different sessions going back to like 1997. And so it doesn't look as pretty as what we just looked at, but you should be able to click through and find some information going back to the late 1990s. Okay. So now I'm going to move on to the Laws tab. So if you click here, there are a few different options available. The first one is the Indiana Constitution. So I'm just going to click there. Um, there's not, I don't need to tell you a whole lot about the Indiana Constitution here, other than the fact that it is, here and it's in PDF format, which is nice because not every state does that, and you can search it. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that it automatically brings up the current Constitution, but you can look at some historical constitutions with different amendments going back to the 1998 amendments, 2000, 2004, and then 2010. So um, that is where you would find the Indiana Constitution. Okay. So the next thing I want to show you under the Laws tab is the Indiana Code. As I mentioned before, the Indiana Code is the state's compilation of statutes that are currently in effect. So as you can see over here on the left, it's organized by general titles. For example, if you scroll down, like Title 15 is Agriculture and Animals, Title 20 is Education. And the bills that are then are passed into law that I just showed you, they're codified into the code and put in where they fit within the different titles. So that's why it's so much easier to research. You don't have to scroll through anything in order. You can actually look by title. So it'll automatically bring you to an HTML version of the code. If you click on a specific title, you can then do a search within that title. So you can see that right now I'm in Title 1, and if I try to do a search, it will only search Title 1, which is helpful. You can also just start navigating through the table of contents. So this can be a helpful thing if you're not really sure which search terms you should be using. It's not always really obvious what search terms you should have if you're not really familiar with statutory language. So you can just kind of scroll through and see if you can find things that are what you're looking for. So if I click on Title 10, and then scroll down to something like Article 18, War Memorials, Chapter 2, World War Memorials, and then something like Section 2, then it'll bring me right to that section of the code. So it doesn't isolate the section, but it does like pop me down to where you need to go. And then if you scroll back up a little bit, then it also gives you this really handy breadcrumb trail so you can see exactly where you are, Title 10, Article 18, Chapter 2. And was there another question?
Yes. How quickly after a bill is passed does it make it into the Indiana Code?
Well, I am actually not sure like how often they print it or like how quickly it's updated on this website. I know, so the laws go into effect generally on July 1st, but I don't know how often the state government like updates the code. I know that on the federal level it takes quite a long time for print, but I'm not sure how quickly they do it online. So I'm going to show you in a minute how to use like a bill number to look up the public law number to then find out where it would be in the code, but I'm actually not sure. Let's see. Yeah, you could look at the credits after the section, so it'll say like as added by public law, whatever in the year. So I mean, there are ways that you'd be able to check to see if you are looking at the current code, but I don't know how often they update it on here. Yeah, I can find out though. And was there another question after that?
No,
No?
Bert.
Okay, that was the
Yeah.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, um, trying to remember where I was here. Okay, so yeah, you have the breadcrumbs right here. The other thing that you can do is click on print version, and then this will allow you to download a PDF, open a PDF, or copy a permalink of this section. And so if you let's open the PDF. So it's good because it doesn't actually download an entire like a PDF of the entire code. It'll just be this section that you're looking at. So this is obviously helpful if you have a patron who just needs to download a specific small code section or something like that. Then you can do that. Okay. There are also some other helpful things under this tab right here that says reference material. So if you click on that, you'll find that there is something called the 2018 Table of Citations. And so this will tell you all of the different sections of the code that have been affected by bills that were passed in 2018 or laws that repealed in 2018, laws that were added. So you can look here and see exactly which sections are going to be affected. So this is one of the ways that you can see how the code is going to be updated by the new bills, since as I said, I'm not exactly sure when they put the most recent one up on the website. Okay, sorry. Andrea is showing me, I think, the answer. So Andrea has found the 2018 Indiana Code is now available online. The version has been updated through the 2018 regular and special sessions. So it looks like this update was posted August 6th of this year. So I think, yeah, it's now the official. So she found that on About IGA Notices and Updates. Thank you, Andrea. So there you go. We answered that question. We're all learning something right now. So another helpful thing under reference material is like sometimes you may have someone who has a bill number, but they don't know where to find that in the code. So a good example is like if someone was interested in Senate Bill 1, which was the Sunday sales, then you can click on this conversion table. So this is going to tell you what the bill number was and then tell you what public law it eventually became. So Senate Bill 1 became Public Law 1. That's a pretty easy one to remember. But if you have a bill number, then you can find out here which public law it eventually became. And then at that point, let's say that you were looking at this before it was actually updated in the code, like if before August 6th when it was updated for this year, you could then take that public law number, go to the reference material here and click on the 2018 Acts of Indiana. And this, once it loads, it takes a minute here, but you can then look at the public law number that you were given. So in this case, Public Law 1. It's going to scroll down to try to find it here. Might take a minute to load. So here's Public Law 1, and then it will tell you which part of the code it's amending or repealing or updating or whatever the case may be. So that's a good way that you can find the code section that's going to be affected, even if it hasn't already been updated in the code. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the code here. And you'll see that right here, I'm looking at the 2018 code. So as with the bills, you can just click on this and then it will take you back to some of the archived ones. So this goes back to 2009. Just clicking on the oldest one. The codes may look a little different in the sense that like you don't have the bar on the left and you may have to kind of navigate some other way. In this case, it's at a bar up at the top, but it will have the information. And if you need to look at a historical code, you can go back to 2009. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how to find some other legislative materials. I'm going to go back to the main page here. The first thing I want to talk about is finding video. So as I mentioned before, you're not going to find a lot from committee reports on bills. So it may be more useful to you to actually look at a video to see what was said. So you can find video by clicking on the Information tab and then going over to the Videos button right here. So the videos go back to 2005. And since this 2018 session is already over, the videos have already been archived. So I'm just going to go ahead and click there as an example. And then you can choose, after you choose the year you're interested in, you can choose whether you want to look at House or Senate proceedings or committee meetings or something like that. So just as an example, I'm going to choose Senate standing committees. And then it looks like it didn't do anything, but it did. So if you go up here, then you can see that it's bringing up all of the different Senate standing committees. So I'm just going to click on appropriations as an example. And then it will bring up all of the different dates that they have videos for the Senate Standing Committee on Appropriations. So you can just pick one and then it'll bring up the video for you. So there is, from what I can tell, unfortunately not a great way to search these. So it's likely that you'll actually have to just browse through and then find a different video. I'm going to go back to the main screen here. There are a few other things I wanted to show you just in regards to legislative information on here. So one thing you might be interested in finding are Senate or House calendars. So you can find them under the Session tab and then pick either Senate or House, whichever one you want. And then you can go to all Senate calendars or all House calendars. If you click on the latest one, it's just going to say that nothing is scheduled. So I'm going to scroll down here and just pick a date kind of randomly to show you what one looks like. It's going to take a second to load here, it looks like. Okay, so here is an example of what a calendar looks like. So it just brings up some different resolutions that are going to be introduced that day, and what is happening with different types of bills. And then you can download that as a PDF if you'd like. I'm not going to right now since it took so long to open. I'm afraid it'll take a while, but you can get a PDF there if you need to. Okay. So similar, oh, and then also I should mention, again, if you want archived ones, you can go back to 2014 that are in basically the same format, or you can click on previous session archives and it will, let's see how far back this one goes, probably the same, 1997. Okay. Kind of similarly, you can find information about House and Senate committees. So if I go to the committees tab right here and then click on standing, just for example, it will bring up all the different Senate standing committees and the House standing committees. So, you can just pick whatever committee you want. I'm just going to choose education kind of randomly here. The website has slowed down considerably. I wonder if we're all on it and clicking on the same things at the same time. So yeah, so Andrea just asked if this website is slow sometimes, and the answer is yes, it is. I was having, good luck while I was working on preparing this webinar, but I think that yes, sometimes it is slow, and it's also, I think, updated rather frequently, and so things might change how they look, but it'll still have all the same information, but eventually things will probably look different than they do right now. So I want this to work because, I mean, I guess I can just tell you, but if you click on let's try a different one. Let's try. I don't have any reason to think this will work better, but I just tried a different one. Um, but if you can get into one of these, then it's it's nice because it gives you, a list of all of the members of the committee and just some general information. You can look at committee calendars to see what their schedules are. You can look at the bills that they've introduced and things like that. So I'm not going to sit here and wait for this forever, but that is something that you can do on this website. Okay. So moving on from committees. The last thing I want to show you for legislative materials are the House and Senate journals. So this is again under the session tab, and then you can see the Senate daily journals right here, and then the House daily journals right here. So let's see if this works or if the website is just totally given out on me. Okay, it's working. So you can pick whatever date you want, and then it will give you a PDF of the daily journal for either the Senate or the House, whichever one you're looking at. So it'll tell you like who was present and just kind of give you an overview of what happened that day. So it'll tell you about resolutions or bills that were read. So and then roll calls as well. Yeah, so you can, and there will be roll calls on there as well, so you can see how people voted on a particular day. Um, and then just like with everything else I've talked about, you can look at the archive right from the page. Just click up there and go back to 2014, or click here to go to previous ones to see it in a slightly different format. Okay. So that's kind of all I wanted to say about legislation. I want to briefly talk about regulations because you can access them from this website. Uh, to find, they're not super obvious. So the other stuff you can kind of intuitively figure out where you should look. Regulations is not like that. You have to go to publications and then look here under where it says rules. So you have the Administrative Rules Drafting Manual, a list of agencies with emergency rulemaking authority. So just kind of some general administrative law information. But today I want to show you the Indiana Register and the Administrative Code. So when you click on that, it takes you to an entirely different website. And the first thing that pops up is the current Indiana Register. So this one goes from October 1st, 2017 to now, so almost a solid year. So and then there are different ways that you can browse through if you want to look at the most recent one. So you can look at daily collections, weekly, or monthly. I'm just going to pick one randomly. And then you can kind of see all of the different things that you can find in the Indiana Register. So there are things like final rules, emergency rules, notice of withdrawals of rules, notices for intent to propose different regulations and things like that. So you can have proposed rules. Of course, I just picked a bad example because I clicked on one that didn't have a number next to it, but it'll tell you like how many are in each one. So this is the notices of intent to adopt a rule, and so you can see you could click on a PDF and it will open that for you. So the administrative code, on the other hand, is in Oh, okay. So you can also see, I'm sorry, in the Indiana Register, another important thing to keep in mind is that it will have links to executive orders from the governor and proclamations. This one doesn't have any, but you could also find those here. And the Attorney General opinions. Okay, so the administrative code, you can get to it from the same place, publications, and then administrative code, but it is just going to take me back to the same website where I just was. So you can find it over here on the left. Click on Indiana Administrative Code, latest update, and then you can. It's similar to the Indiana code in that you can search by topic instead of by date. So everything that has been like a finalized rule is going to be codified in the Indiana Administrative Code, and you can either search through by topic and click into it, or there is a very like kind of basic search functionality here that will let you search both the Indiana Register and the Administrative Code. So if you want to find out information on, for example, like the Indiana Horse Racing Commission, you could just go over here and type in horse and then do a search, and it will bring this up for you where you can either search within the Indiana Administrative Code or within just the Indiana Register, and you can search by different dates. So you can see if you scroll down here, it brings up a lot of different information about the Indiana Horse Racing Commission. So There is a lot more I could say about administrative law. It's a very large topic, but I'm actually going to leave it there for the purposes of this webinar since I talk so much about legislation. There's just not enough time to go into a full webinar on administrative law. So just know that it's there. You can link to it from the Indiana General Assembly and just try to keep straight of what the administrative code, how it's different from the Indiana Register. Okay, so I want to leave some time for questions, but there are a few things that I want to say kind of to close. So the first is that I showed you a lot of materials that are archived on the Indiana General Assembly's website, but that only go back to the early 2000s or late 1990s. So if you find yourself ever needing something that's older than that, you can call us at the Jerome Hall Law Library, and we can help you because we have all of the superseded Indiana codes going back to the inception. We have Indiana Acts, we have bills, House and Senate journals. So you can always call us to have us help you if you have something that you need. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of these, so I was just talking today about freely available sources. A lot of these materials are also available on other databases that you may have access to through your library. So Hein Online has all the old Indiana Acts, for example. LLMC has old journals. So there are other ways that you can find these materials if you have access to those databases. And then I wanted to make you aware of some research guides that the Jerome Hall Law Library has put together. So if you if you Google Jerome Hall Law Library research guides or navigate to it from our law library's website, you'll find lots of different research guides. And just to give you an example of the sampling, if you do a Control F for Indiana, then you'll find different research guides that our government documents librarian, Jennifer Morgan, has put together. So information on compiling state legislative histories with information on Indiana legislative documents, Indiana government and state documents, Indiana legal research. So there are many different resources that we have that might help you as you try to navigate through the IGA's website. Okay, so with that, I think I would like to turn it over for questions. So I'm going to try to figure out how to get back over to, okay. Okay, so Andrea, you have a question?
Yeah, would you show searching by code
Yes. I don't have an example code citation with me right now. Do you have one? Okay, so I'm going to go back to share my screen. Andrea asked me to give an example code citation. Can everyone see this? You got kicked off? Okay. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, I think this might be working. Okay. Is that working for everyone? Okay, so Andrea wanted me to show searching by code citation, and she had an example citation. So what was the citation, Andrea?
IC
Okay.
422 2.
Okay. So yeah, if you have a citation, as I said, it's like a 4-part citation. So this is how you would bring it up. You just go up to the upper right corner, type in the citation, and then it will bring the citation right up for you. So that's an easy way to bring something up if you have the citation. Yeah, tax again. So it's title, article, chapter, section.
Okay, we have another comment. Mention the importance of the fiscal impact statements in legislation.
Mention the import of the fiscal impact statements in legislation. So I can show you how to find them. So I'm going to go back to bills here. So legislation, bills, and I'm just going to go back to the bill that I had been looking at before, and then click on fiscal note. And I think this is just information about this bill compiled by the Office of Fiscal and Management Analysis. And then, I mean, aside from that, if someone knows more about that, then they can go ahead and hop in. If it was Bert's question, so maybe he knows more about what you would want to use that for. I know how to find them. I can't say that I know the importance.
Bert said they estimate how much legislation would cost.
Okay, so they estimate how much legislation would cost. So yeah, yeah, so you could find those there. Okay. Anything?
We have another one. Can you click on the repealed sections of the Indiana Code to see what they were?
So that might be a case where you'd have to go to the archive, because in the Indiana Code, if something is repealed, they're going to take it out. So then you'd need to go back to the archives to where that code section was still good, and then you could see it there. Or look in the session laws, because then it'll show how it's like struck out. Yeah, it doesn't get taken out of the session laws, so you could look at it there. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Andrea just asked if I could show a repealed section, but without an example citation, it would be too hard to try to find one. So, but you can see them in the archived codes. It's just not going to be in the current one because they take them out. Any other questions?
I've got someone typing right now.
Okay, great. I don't want to go back over because it takes too long to share my screen again, so I'll just let you read it to me.
Okay, Jane asked, she said, just jumping back real quick to voting history. So you need to go into each item. You can't just look at the voting history of one legislator in one place.
I did not find where you could, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. The question is, can you look at the voting history of a particular legislator without going into each bill to see how they voted? Um, that is a good question. I am not entirely sure of the answer, to be honest. Yeah, that's another one that I would have to look into. That's not something that I've run across thus far. Can you, Kara, who asked the question so that we can get back with them?
Jane Walters.
Jane Walters.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And Bert just commented, some interest groups rank state legislators on how they voted on selected issues of interest to them. For example, the American Conservative Union.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions?
It looks like some other people are typing.
Okay.
Other than that directory, is there a directory, PDF directory, legislators?
Andrea just asked if there was a PDF directory of the legislators, and I believe that you can just go right here to legislators and then download a list of current legislators. Yeah, and this will give you an alphabetical list.
Okay, Melinda Mulligan commented, you can find what bills legislators authored or co-authored, but not how they voted.
Okay, and that's what I was seeing as well, so it's good to have that confirmed.
Got a couple other people still typing.
Couple typing. Okay, we can wait for them.
Bert commented, not all bills receive a roll call vote. Some are voice votes only, which are not recorded.
Okay. So everyone's being very helpful. I'm learning things about this too. Yeah, people are answering the questions. Okay, is anyone else still typing?
Kathleen Bowman said, thanks for all the information. Does anyone else have any last questions that you'd like to ask him?
And I also wanted to give out Andrea's email address. So I can either type it over in the chat if people are done asking questions, or I can just read it out loud. Are there any last questions before I stop sharing my screen?
No, Susan Smith said, thank you for your time. Melinda Mulligan,
Okay.
thank you for the links and information.
Okay. So let me go over and I'll type in Andrea's email address then.
Okay. I'm also going to bring up the screen for the LEU certificate.
There we go. Okay, I just realized at the last minute that I had access to the chat the whole time from my screen share. So, yes. So, thank you anyway for reading all of those out loud.
Okay. Now you can see it, right?
Yeah. And then my email, I'll write that down too. Okay.
So I went ahead and shared the link to the LEU certificate. It's actually a TLEU, but and it will say that on the certificate. So if you want to upload that to your computer, you can print that out. I'll also send a link to it in the email, follow-up email that I'll send out.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, hold on, Andrea, did you have another question? No? Okay. So if there are no more questions, I just want to thank everyone for bearing with me as I coughed my way through this entire webinar. I hope it wasn't too distracting or disgusting. And thank you again. This was a great experience.
Yes, thank you, Kim, for doing this for us. I really appreciate it.
And Indigo would love to hear from anybody who has ideas about further webinars in the future.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.